Hi there, my name is Irene, and in this video, I would like to introduce you to the Sketchup user interface. Now, I know that these may feel like, well, I can just Google it, which you can. But what I want to do here is not just tell you what are the parts of the user face and what can be found on them, but especially when you're getting started working with SketchUp, what things you should be paying attention to among the user interface. So let's get to it. Now, before we can get into the SketchUp user interface, we need to choose a SketchUp template. So when you first launch SketchUp, this is the window that you're going to be met with. This is the home page, so to speak. Few things to pay attention to. On the very top, you're going to have the templates. We're going to talk about them in a second. You also have underneath them a list of the recent files that you've been working with. You can also click here on Open File, and this is going to allow you to directly load a file from somewhere else in your computer. On the left side, you can see, again, this is the home page. You also have a learning section that has a couple of options. This is just education tools that you can access at your own pace. We also have the licensing section, which is going to show you the characteristics of the kind of license you have, whether it's free, whether it's pro, whether it's educational, whatever it is. And on the top right corner, you are going to see your user. So for example, if I click here, that's me. Now, when it comes to choosing a template, you may be a little bit overwhelmed because you don't know what to choose. The important thing here to understand is, don't worry, templates are really not a big deal in SketchUp. They really just set up two things. One is the background. It's not exactly background, it's actually called style, but I'm going to call it background. So basically the appearance of your SketchUp model. And the other thing is the unit system that you're going to be working with. So do you want to work with imperial? Do you want to work with metric? Do you want to work with millimeters, meters, feet, or inches? Now, what's interesting thing is that if you expand on more templates, you can actually see that SketchUp has a good amount of templates to choose from. They're usually oriented to the different professional fields that use SketchUp, but if you are uncertain, you can always go with the simple. You can also see this little heart, which is going to allow you to set a specific template as your favorite, and that means that the next time that you open SketchUp, that one template is going to show up at the top. So in this case, I am going to go with the simple inches just because it's the first one. Again, if I change my mind, I can basically very easily change those properties. So it's not that big of a deal. And here we are on the SketchUp user interface. So I'm going to quickly introduce you to like what are the parts that make out the user interface, and then we're going to go into some of the details that are within those areas. So first thing first, we have the title bar, which is on the top here, and it's going to give you the name of the file and the version of SketchUp that you're working with. Side note, this is the user interface on a Windows version of SketchUp. If you're working with a Mac version of SketchUp, first of all, my condolences. But second of all, and more important, some things may be in different locations, so please keep that in mind. If I point out to something and you don't find it in your SketchUp, it might be because you're working with Mac. Up next, we have the menu bar, which is this guy over here, and this guy is going to basically contain all of the options. So technically speaking, you should be able to find everything you need through the menu bar. But what you're going to learn in a second is that you don't actually want to have to go to the menu bar every time that you want to do something in SketchUp. That's not efficient, that's slow, and it's annoying. Then we have the toolbars, which are these guys over here. Now, the toolbars can be customized in many different ways. You can change their size, you can change their position. So to change their position, you're going to find on the left side or on the top side these kind of like dotted section, and you're going to see that your cursor is going to switch to the move cursor. And if you click and drag, this is going to allow you to move that toolbar along the kind of like rail that it's on, or you can move it if you want it to be on a separate rail, or you can even move it so it's floating. You can also move it to the side, and then it's going to dock it vertically. So you have a lot of options on how you set up your toolbars. The important thing about the toolbars is that they're going to give you quick access to the commands within SketchUp. So for example, you can see that I can quickly choose to draw a line, or I can quickly choose to paint something or to measure something. In my experience, when it comes to the toolbars, the more the merrier, because I'm a professional. But that being said, you don't want to get in the habit of just turning all of the toolbars. What's going to happen is that as you develop your particular needs as a professional, you're going to realize what are the commands that you keep on going for constantly. And those are the commands that you're going to want to make sure that you can access through a toolbar. If you want to add or remove tools from your toolbar, you can go on empty space, right click, and you're gonna get a full list, or you can also go on the menu bar, which we're gonna see in a second. Up next, we have the default tray panel, which is this guy over here. It is going to contain commands still, but it's going to be commands that are too complex to be contained within just a toolbar. We're going to see them in a lot more detail, but these default tray is also pretty flexible. So by default, it is locked on the right side of your screen. But for example, if you are an AutoCAD oldie like me, you might be more comfortable having it on the left side, where the properties of everything in SketchUp and even Revit have always been. If you have a dual monitor, you can actually move it outside of your screen. So once again, you have a lot of options. My Mac users, you don't get a default tray. Instead, what's going to happen is that each of these windows is going to be its own little floating thingy, and then you can kind of like stack them together. So same, but different. Just keep that in mind. You can also, with the default tray, click on this little pin here, and that is going to make it so it collapses when it's not in use. I have mixed feelings about this. I don't know why it kind of like bothers me. I don't know, I'm old. I have my preferences, so I leave it on pin. And you can also delete your default tray. I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to do it later just to demonstrate how to bring it back. Then we have the measurement box, which is this guy that we can see right now on the bottom right side of our screen. Right now, it looks disabled, like it's not showing any information, and that is because we're not doing anything. The measurement box is going to show relevant measurements based on whatever it is that you're working with. So for example, if I go to the line command, let's say L for line, you're going to see that now my measure box has become activated, and it's going to show me the length of that line. So if I click here, see, now it's showing me that length. But if, for example, let's say I want to switch to the rectangle command, then the measurement box is going to switch to show me the dimensions of that rectangle. See, so the width and depth of my rectangle. So it's a very versatile tool that allows us to not just get information, but work in SketchUp with precision. After that, we have the status bar, which is this guy here on the bottom. And I actually really like this guy because I like to call it the cheat sheet bar. And it's basically going to give you information based on whatever you're doing. Now, this guy is super important because what you're going to see is that usually when it comes to executing commands in SketchUp, they usually require to follow multiple steps in a precise order. And a lot of times, especially when you're getting started with SketchUp, people will be like, I'm trying to do this thing and it's not working. And 9 out of 10 times what's happening is that they're skipping a step or they're putting it in the wrong order. So the cheat sheet bar, the status bar, is going to help you know what your next steps are or your options are. So again, if I go to the line command, for example, it's going to tell me that my options are to either click to set the first endpoint, or I can use my arrow keys to lock my inference direction. Once I click that first click, now it's going to tell me, okay, you're going to click to set the second endpoint, or you could enter a length. So again, when in doubt, check out the cheat sheet bar. And then finally, we have the drawing area, which is this space over here. This is where your modeling is going to occur. It is an infinite space. There is no size limit when you're working with SketchUp. So you can be working with things that are measured in millimeters, or you could be working with things that are measured in miles. SketchUp can accommodate all of it. One thing to keep in mind from the drawing area is that you have another contextual menu that can be accessed when you right-click on the drawing area. So if I right-click on empty space, this is what I'm going to get. But for example, if I right-click on a line, I'm going to get a set of properties that are exclusive to lines. If I right-click on a face, I'm going to get a set of properties that are exclusive to faces. And if I right-click on a group or component, I will get a set of options that are exclusive to groups or components. So again, keep in mind is that you are right-clicking on that thing. If I select this line here, but I right-click on empty space, the contextual menu is going to be for the empty space, not for the line. Finally, I just want to bring attention to these axes here. We're going to be talking about it a lot more in a second, but this guy is the real MVP of SketchUp. So with that out of the way, what I want to do now is quickly run over the file menu and talk about what each of these menus have, and especially when you're getting started, what things you should be paying attention to. So first of all, we have the file menu, which is pretty standard at this point. Every program has one, and of course SketchUp does too. This is where you're going to find things like new, open, save, save as, exit. You're going to find recent files, you're going to find print, but there's a couple of things that I want to highlight here. The first one is the option to save as. So One of the ways that SketchUp works with is that you can open SketchUp models that have been created with either your version of SketchUp or older versions of SketchUp, but you cannot open SketchUp files that have been saved in a newer version of SketchUp. So for example, if I have SketchUp 2024, I can open any file that was created in an older version of SketchUp, but I could not open a file created in SketchUp 2025, which doesn't exist yet. There's a little bit of a problem with the SketchUp 2024. I've noticed that you can no longer do this. So if I go here and I go save as type, it no longer gives me the option. I don't know if this is something that is going to be fixed or whatnot, but if you go to older versions of SketchUp, so for example, SketchUp 2023 and older, when you expand here, it actually gives you a list of all of the older versions of SketchUp. So I hope that this is something that they're just like implementing, or maybe it's an option that I need to turn on and off. But this has always been a very strong feature of SketchUp, the option to you being able to choose which version of SketchUp you save the file as. The other thing that I want to mention from the file menu is import and export. So this is a very important thing, because the way that SketchUp works, especially in the beginning, when SketchUp was just a little program trying to establish itself in the industry, is that it made collaboration with people using other programs very easy. So that's what import and export allows you to do. Import allows you to bring stuff that is in other formats other than SketchUp into your SketchUp file. And this can be a bunch of different things. So you can bring in images, you can bring 2D drawings, you can bring 3D models from a whole range of formats. And one thing that I really like is that I've noticed that SketchUp has done a really good job in keeping up with what are the formats most commonly used on the industry. So in the, I think it was SketchUp 2023, they integrated Revit. So now you can easily import Revit files into SketchUp. Export, on the other hand, is going to allow you to extract information from your SketchUp file and convert it into other formats. So you can see here that you can export your, for example, I can take my SketchUp 3D model and I can export it as a different kind of 3D model. There's a bunch of formats for me to choose from. So again, import and export allow you to bring stuff in, get stuff out. Another important thing that I'm going to mention now, although we're going to go a lot deeper later, is printing. You should never print in SketchUp. I don't know why they have that option there. It's not good. There's better ways of doing things. Just ignore printing. Up next, we have edit, which is, again, pretty much standard with most software. Here's where you're going to find things like undo, redo, cut, copy, paste, delete, that kind of stuff. Now, there's a couple of things that I want to point out. Number one is these guys over here. So this is showing us what is the quick key assigned to that command. So this is an important thing to understand. SketchUp is a quick key based software similar to, for example, like Photoshop or any other Adobe software. That basically means that if you want to quickly access a command, instead of having to click on the screen or type in an entire command, you can type a single key or two keys, depending on the circumstances, and that is going to activate that command. And what I really like about SketchUp is that it has this kind of like cheat sheet where it shows you like, oh yeah, like undo is going to be Control C, cut is going to be Control X. And this is very nice because, especially as a professional, it is very important that you learn to use the quick keys. This is going to allow you to be efficient. This is going to allow you to be fast. But the thing is that, like, I'm not a robot. I'm not plugged into the matrix. I can't just automatically learn all of the quick keys. And every time that I go on vacation, I forget everything, including my address and my phone number. So being able to have this cheat sheet here that reminds me of the commands is very friendly. It allows me to like, oh, I forgot this guy. There it is. No need for me to panic. Then we have the view menu. The view menu is going to contain commands that in most cases, you basically turn on and off features that will change the way that you view the model. They don't actually affect the model. So for example, shadows. So you can turn shadows on and then you can turn shadows off, or you can turn fog on, or you can turn fog off, or you can change the face style to X-ray, and then you can switch it back to not be X-ray. Okay, so all of the commands that you find under view edit the way that you view your SketchUp world, but they do not actually edit or modify in any way, shape, or form the model. One thing that I want to point out from the view this early on is going to be the toolbars. So we already talked a little bit earlier about toolbars and the fact that you can customize them. So one of the ways was right-clicking on this empty space, but the other way is coming here to the toolbars. So these are all the toolbars that come by default with SketchUp. You can get a lot more toolbars, but we're not going to be doing that right now. Now, when you first start with SketchUp, again, SketchUp basically gives you this. It's called the Getting started toolbar, and it is very intentionally created to be super simple. And the reason for this is because they want the program to be as unintimidating as possible. So it's like you look at this and you're like, okay, so these are my drawn commands, these are some modifications, this is some, oh, this is getting scary, right? But the thing is that if you're going to be using SketchUp professionally, this bar is gonna, it's gonna stay short very quickly. So my recommendation is that as you develop as a professional, you're going to be adding more and more toolbars. But at the very least, if you're starting and you have no idea what's going on, my recommendation is that you turn off the Getting Started tool and you turn on the large tool set. So what you can see is that this is kind of like the Getting Started toolbar older brother. You have some of the, let me actually turn them side by side. So some of the commands are there. So see, we have these select tool, we have the eraser tool, we have the draw, but then we have a few more options. So for a professional, the large tool set is a much better way to start with SketchUp. This Getting Started is a little bit too civilian for my taste. Let's put it that way. A few other toolbars that I recommend in the very beginning to get are going to be styles and views. Let's start with those two only. And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to bring them down. See how I'm starting to like customize my SketchUp user interface this early on. So you can basically create your own bar, turn things on, turn things off, and then you can save that. So you can have your, I can have my Irene bar that I can go back and forth if I want to, or you can reset if you want to go back to like the original. The other thing that you can do is if you go on options, you can check on and off large icons. This is just going to make your icons a little bit smaller. And I personally like to keep it small because that way I can fit more icons. I may have a problem, but I will leave them large for these videos just so visibility is a little bit better. Okay, so if the view menu is going to contain all of those little things that we can turn on and off to help us work or change the visibility settings of our model, what the camera is going to do is going to be very, very different. So the camera has all of the tools that allows us to modify the way that we view and navigate our SketchUp model. And this is when I'm going to mention something very, very important. If you're gonna work with SketchUp, you need to get a mouse. I don't care what kind of mouse, you can get a $10 mouse. I'm not here to judge, but you need a mouse. And the reason for this is because the camera navigation tools are by default mapped to your mouse. If you do not have a mouse, you're gonna have to click commands on a screen, and that is barbaric, to be entirely honest with you. It's also super frustrating. I one time saw a student working, like navigating their SketchUp model with the mouse pad on their laptop, and I swear to God, I almost had a stroke. So do yourself a favor, get yourself a mouse. Once you get used to it, you can, start upgrading to the ergonomic fancy ones. But when you're working in SketchUp, there's going to be three main tools that you're going to use for navigation, and that is zoom, pan, and orbit. So first of all, zoom. Zoom is going to be mapped to your mouse wheel. When you move the wheel forward, you zoom in. When you move the wheel backwards, you zoom out. One thing that I want you to pay attention to is the location of your mouse, because where your mouse is tells SketchUp where you're going to. So I'm going to give you a very common scenario that will happen to you inevitably. So let's say that I want to zoom into this lady's bracelet. So I'm going to keep my cursor away from her. And look what's going to happen. Here I'm starting and it's like, yep, we're getting started. We're getting started. And then ring, ring, I get a phone call and I have to get up and go take care of that phone call. And then a raccoon is going to come out through the window and it's just going to specifically go to my mouse and it's going to do this. And then I return from my phone call and my lady is gone. This happened to me when I very first started SketchUp. And this was, first of all, this was like 15 years ago. Second of all, I didn't speak English. So when this happened to me the very first time, what you're going to notice is that if you try to zoom in or out, like I'm currently moving the wheel of my mouse, like I'm doing stuff and nothing is happening. So when this happened to me, I thought that I had lost my model forever. And I just closed it down and I started a new file because I didn't know any better. So first of all, how do we fix this problem? Very easy. What you're going to do is you're going to go to your camera and you're going to find the option zoom extend. The quick key is Control-Shift-E, or you can also press the key Z and then right click and zoom extend. So what this is going to do is zoom in or out as much as it needs to reframe your entire model. So it's what I like to call a screen reset. Okay, great. We don't need to start a new project, but more important than knowing how to fix this is to understand why did this happen. So SketchUp is what I like to describe as an intuitive software. This basically means that SketchUp is picking up on what you're putting down and it's trying to make decisions based on that. So basically what happens is that whatever your cursor is, SketchUp understands that that is where you're trying to go. So if your cursor is in empty space, SketchUp doesn't understand how far, how fast, how much you're trying to zoom in. But look what's going to happen if I put the cursor over the bracelet. What's going to happen now is not just that staying on the focused on the frame, but you're going to notice that actually as I zoom in, like it's just kind of like reducing the distance that it covers with each wheel pass, because it basically understands like, hey, you're reaching your destination. We are at the bracelet, and I can zoom in quite a lot. Okay, so always keep your cursor to where you're trying to go. This is also going to keep that object in focus. You're going to see that even if I do this, see how my my bracelet and it's gone. If I put it here, it's always going to keep the bracelet on the screen. The second command is pan. Now, pan can be accessed by pressing the wheel and holding shift. And this is basically going to allow you to slide left, right, up, down, long across the screen, but you're basically keeping the same camera direction and the same distance from your target. So with zooming in or out, we're moving closer or further from the object, but we're keeping our camera direction. With panning, we're keeping our camera direction, we're keeping our distance, and we are just kind of like sliding along the sides and up and down. This is basically the way that you would work with, for example, something like AutoCAD. You just have zoom and pan. And then finally, because this is not AutoCAD 2D, this is a 3D program, we have Orbit. So Orbit will be accessible by pressing the wheel. And you can see that like little twirl, little arrow. So what's going to happen now is that when you move your cursor, that is going to allow you to orbit around your model. And this is a very important thing to understand. In SketchUp, the camera is moving, not the object. It's not like you're holding an object in your hand and you're rotating it. No, no, no. You are moving around that object. So the way that I like to explain the camera settings in SketchUp is, imagine that you have a GoPro attached to a drone. So orbit, pan, and zoom is going to allow you to control the drone itself. And then we're going to have a set of options for the GoPro. Now, those options are going to be, first and foremost, standard views. So when you're working, especially with construction documentation, we have standard views. These are the views that we always present in our construction documentation. So this is going to be your top view or floor plan. This is going to be your front view, side view, back view, bottom view. Again, whether you're doing furniture design, millwork design, architectural design, you're usually working with these kinds of views. So I'm going to show you how they work. Let's say that I'm going to make a little house here quickly. There you go. My 4-year bachelor in architecture finally paid off. So what I can do here is, if I want to get, for example, the front view, I could try to orbit my camera until I see it, or I could go to camera, standard views, and say that I just want to see the front view. And it's just going to immediately take me there. So camera, standard view, top, and so on and so forth. But here is where a very important concept of SketchUp is going to start applying, which is the idea of creating efficiencies. Basically, the way that this works is that the more you use a command, the more accessible you need to make it for yourself. If I want to access my standard views, look how many clicks it takes me. So 1 click for camera, 2nd click for standard views, 3rd click for the standard view of my choice. Or if I have the toolbar for the standard views, I can just click on it. I can click on it, and then I can click on it, and click on it, and click on it, and click on it. So this is the way that you want to think about SketchUp. You want to think in terms of, do I use this command often enough? Then it should be a toolbar. Do I use it very, very often? Then it should have a quick key. And we're going to talk about those in a minute. Okay, so standard views allows you to quickly move your drone, your camera position, to preset alignments that we use within the industry. We also have these kind of like view styles. By default, your SketchUp file is going to be set up as a perspective. This basically means that depth affects the view. Things that are further look smaller, things that are closer look bigger. This is the way that we humans perceive the world, but this is not really the way that we do construction documentation. So if you want to do construction documentation, you can switch to parallel projection. So parallel projection, also known as isometric, is basically a drawing style where there is no depth. So all things keep their exact distances. Now, these creates what feels like a little bit of a distorted view, but this is a very commonly used in industry style. Up next, we have drawing commands, and this is where a lot of people panic, especially if you come from working with other software. If you come from 3ds Max or Revit or something, AutoCAD 3D or something more advanced, you might look at the drawing commands and get very concerned, because if you look at it, there are absolutely no 3D objects in it. And even the 2D objects are quite limited. So we have what, 2, 6, 10. We have 10 drawing commands total. Now I'm going to give you a little spoiler. You don't even need those 10 commands. You just need 4 commands to draw everything that you need to draw in SketchUp. And that is line, rectangle, circle, and arc. The way that SketchUp drawing works is by addition. So you can think about it almost like color theory. You know how in color theory, you only need 3 colors to make every color. You just need red, yellow, and blue, if we're working with paint, for example, and then black and white. Because you mix those colors to create those complex custom colors. So the same thing is going to happen with SketchUp. It gives you very basic drawing commands, but then it allows you to add them up and merge them and combine them in such a way that you can create really complex geometry. So because of that, the tools are a lot more extensive. Now, I personally hate the name of this menu because they are all tools. The drawing commands are tools, the camera commands are tools. I like to call this one the modification menu. Shout out to my 3ds Max users, because basically here you're going to find all of the commands that allow you to modify the stuff that has been created. So you're going to be able to move things, rotate, scale, push, pull, offset, whatnot. So this is where the magic of SketchUp will happen. And again, we're going to see all of them in much further detail. All right, so I may or may not have taken a break for lunch, and it may or may not be later in the day. Anyway, up next, we have the window menu, which is basically going to contain commands that are too big or too complex to be fit as a toolbar. So for example, this is where you're going to find the default tray. And you can see that similar to the toolbar, you have a bunch of different options that you can just check on or off to add them to your default tray. And same as with the toolbars, you don't necessarily need to have all of them on. What's going to happen is that as you continue working with the program, you're going to figure out which ones are the ones that matter to you. This is also a good point to mention that, for example, if the raccoon comes back in from the window and I'm again gone taking a call and the raccoon comes in, closes the default tray, the way that you're going to get it back is by going window, default tray, and show tray. So there's no unfixable problems in SketchUp, thank God. The two very important windows that I want to mention are going to be the model info and preference. Let's start with model info. One important thing to understand is that when I use the term 3D model, I am referring to the SketchUp file. So those two things are exchangeable. The SketchUp file is the SketchUp model, it's the 3D model. Now, the format for SketchUp files is SKP, P as in potato, but you're going to notice that when you save a SketchUp file, you're actually going to get 2 files. You're going to get the SKP, potato, and you're going to get SKB, that is your backup. You should never delete the backup. So within model info, we're going to find all of the properties and settings that are relevant to that specific file, to that specific 3D model. Now, there's a bunch of options here. The only one that I'm going to focus on right now are the units. So one thing that I really like about SketchUp is that it's what we call a unit-based software. That means that when you draw something, that thing is whatever dimensions it is. And when you change your unit system, all you're changing is the numbers in the measuring tape. So see, for example, right now I am set up for architectural, which means that I'm working with feet and fractional inches. So for example, if I come here and I draw, let's say I'm going to draw a rectangle that is going to be 1 feet by 2 feet. If I come here with my measuring tape and I measure that rectangle, you're going to see that it's telling me that one edge is 1 feet, second edge is the other is 2 feet. But if I come here and I switch to, for example, fractional, which is inches only, and I come back here with my measuring tape, what you're going to see now is that now it's 12 inches by 24 inches. It automatically converted the units, and it can do that from imperial to metric. If I come here and I switch to decimal, and then let's say that we're going to be working with millimeters, and I come back here with my measuring tape, now that measuring tape is going to measure 304 by 609. So this is super, super important because especially when you're working with multiple consultants, and especially in Canada, we're lucky like that, you are going to work with different people that are working with different unit systems. So for the most part, engineers and architects work in millimeters, contractors usually work in feet and inches, and anyone who does woodwork or cabinetry works in inches. So it's like everyone is doing their own thing. And what this means is that you don't need to worry about having to convert units back and forth. The other advantage of this is because the units are specific to the file, you can actually move objects from one file to another without having to worry about conversion. So for example, if I have a file open that is set up in inches and I have another file open that is set up in meters, I can simply grab an object from the first file, copy it and paste it in the other object, and it's going to be automatically scaled because things are the size they are. Anything that is on model info is going to be stuff that is specific to the SketchUp file. Preferences, on the other hand, so we go back to Window and Preferences. Preferences are going to be the properties of this version of SketchUp on this machine. So this is very important to understand. You can have multiple versions of SketchUp in your computer. Like I always have at least 2 versions of SketchUp just for paranoid reasons, but I also have a desktop and a laptop. So technically speaking, I always have at least 3 versions of SketchUp going on in my life. And you can basically have different settings for each and every one of them. You cannot copy those settings from one SketchUp to the other. So I cannot, for example, say like, oh, I want like, I don't know, I want like my autosave or I want my quick keys from this version and then just automatically Control C, Control V. There are some ways that you can migrate those preferences from one version to the other, but for the most part, you're gonna have to set them up manually each time. So each time that you install SketchUp, you're gonna have to set them up. Now, these are quite technical. I'm not gonna go over all of them. I'm just gonna go over the ones that you should consider in the beginning. Number 1, we have drawing. This one is super important. When you first install SketchUp, your click style is gonna be set up to auto detect. Auto detect, I'm going to show you exactly what it does. So there is a very popular command in SketchUp called push pull. The quick key is P, and this is basically what allows you to extrude 2D objects into 3D objects. But if you've ever used this tool, you may have felt that it feels weird. Like sometimes it's like, oh, and then it stopped, or like it's like you go and oh, and then it did the thing, or and oh, why it keeps on doing that. So the reason for that is because of the click style. In SketchUp, there are 2 ways that you can activate a command that requires like clicking. Option 1 is that you click once, you move to the destination, and then you click again to end the command. Option 2 is that you click and hold that click, drag, and then when you release, that ends the command. The problem is that when you have your click style to auto detect, SketchUp will make that choice for you. And again, SketchUp is not very good at making decisions, basically. So my recommendation here is that you make sure to set it up to click, move, click. The other problem with click, drag, release is that it's going to put a lot of tension on your wrists because you're going to have to click and hold, and like your hand is going to be doing this quite a lot, and then you're going to end up with fingers like mine. That's not good. They shouldn't do that. So click, move, click is the way to go. The other thing that I want to mention is for general. So when you go here, the most important thing that I want to point out is the autosave. So as I already mentioned, SketchUp does create backups for you, which is fantastic. That means that if it crashes, instead of you losing everything, you're just going to lose whatever was done up to the point before the last backup. But it is very important to check the backup time. Now, if you open your SketchUp preferences and you go to your general, you might notice that your backup is set up to 5 minutes. Now, what you need to understand here is that this backup saving is not like, oh, it's happening under the hood and you don't notice it. No, SketchUp is going to stop everything and it's going to save, and then it's going to let you continue doing your thing. So the thing is that the bigger the file is and the more potato your computer is, the longer it's going to take to make the save. And I'm going to give you a good example. I had a student once that came to me very worried, and she's like, oh my God, Irene, I think that my computer has a virus. And I was like, oh no, that's terrible. And she's like, SketchUp virus. And I was like, that's not a thing, but go off. And then she was like, no, yeah, it's a SketchUp virus because I only have it when I'm working on SketchUp. I'm working on my file, and then the computer is freezing all the time. But then when I leave SketchUp, the computer is fine. And I was like, open the preferences. And indeed, what she had was that she had her backup set up to every 5 minutes, and her file was big enough that it was probably taking another 5 minutes to save. So that basically means that she was spending half of her time just waiting around for her computer to save. So 5 minutes is insane. My recommendation is 15 minutes. That is enough time that like it's saving often enough that if it crashes, I'm not going to lose so much information that like I want to quit the career altogether. But then it also means that if the file is taking a significant amount of time, I'm not going to go insane because like it's just constantly freezing. The other very important thing that I want to mention is shortcuts. So this is very, very important if you're intending on using SketchUp professionally. So I already talked about the importance of the difference between accessing commands from the menu versus the command bar. But there's a third layer to it, which is that the commands that you use the most often should have a quick key assigned to them. So basically, you want to think about it this way. Any command that you have to use multiple times a day you should access it by pressing a key on your keyboard. Any command that you use a couple times a day or a couple times a week, that can be in the command bar. Any command that you use maybe like once a day or once a week or something like that, that can stay in the menu in general. Okay, so because of that, what's going to happen is that over time, you're going to figure out what are the commands that you want to assign quick keys to. The other thing to consider is the fact that you have a limited real estate, right? Like you only have so many letters in the alphabet. There are certain tricks, so you can do control letter or shift letter or alt letter to kind of like multiply the number of keys. But in general, you want to be smart about what keys have a key assigned to them. So for example, I don't have it here because I've already customized my keyboard quick keys, but the letter O is assigned to orbit, which doesn't make any sense because if you remember, orbit can be accessed through your mouse wheel. So what that means in my mind is that the letter O is free real estate to assign to any other command. And that's kind of the way that you want to take it. Like another one for me is the measuring tape. So the measuring tape is super useful in SketchUp, and the quick key is T4 tape. But to me, it keeps on reminding me to the distance key of like AutoCAD or the dimension key of Revit. So my brain had a very hard time switching from D letters to like T. So I just assigned the quick key D to my measuring tape. Again, I'm not saying that you have to do exactly these ones. I just want to give you an idea of how you can tackle assigning quick keys. And the best thing is that you only really need to do it once. Once you've saved this, every time that you open SketchUp, because it's SketchUp on this machine, it's going to have all of those properties. And if you have to upgrade SketchUp or you have to install SketchUp in another machine, you can actually export your shortcuts and then just install them in that other version of SketchUp. So it's really handy that way. Okay, so that is going to be for the Windows. Then we have extensions. Now, these you may or may not see depending on which version of SketchUp you have. Some versions of SketchUp, you need to have an extension installed for this menu to show up. But in the newer versions, it shows regardless. This is where you will see and manage most of the extensions that you can install in SketchUp. We're going to spend like a whole season talking about them. Worry not. And then finally, there's the help menu, which has never helped anyone, and it's there for liability reasons. Cool, cool, cool. So that covers all of the elements within the user interface that you need to be familiar up to this point. What's going to happen is that as we start introducing other topics, I will introduce you to the rest of like the elements within those menus as they become relevant to the videos. But otherwise, we have reached the end of this video. I hope that you found it helpful. If you have any questions, by all means, feel free to leave them in the comments. But otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Have a good one. Bye.